Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an episode of Chargers Analytics with Arjun. I know it's been a little bit since my last episode, but I wanted to get back to you guys with a really cool new concept that I've been working on at PFF with a couple other interns at the company. And I really wanted to share some of the early results that I just released on Twitter and just talk about how they relate to Justin Herbert and how they relate to the Chargers in general. So I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you through what we're going to be looking at. So basically, we at PFF have a group of interns that are looking at a new idea. So the new idea is, how do quarterbacks perform versus perfectly covered plays and non-perfectly covered plays? So starting in 2019, PFF began to chart every single coverage player on every single play and assigned a grade to them ranging from -2 to +2. Now, there's a large amount of players that receive zeros on a play just because they're not really involved on a play, especially like a free safety, right? Where they're just either taking away a deep crosser or they're not really involved in like the screen game or short intermediate game. But there are players on multiple players during a play that get assigned a grade. So what we decided to do at PFF is look at how many times do teams play coverage perfectly. And how we define that is a perfectly covered play is a play where every single coverage player has either a grade of 0 or a positive grade of 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1, etc. So that is what a perfectly covered play is. And that is the baseline of which we created this analysis. So basically this graph is looking at how quarterbacks perform versus perfectly covered plays. So when everyone on defense does their job right or doesn't mess up versus when the defense does mess up, which is the y-axis. And when they do play perfect, it's the x-axis. And again, we're using EPA per play. EPA stands for expected points added. It is a good way to measure quarterback efficiency, has a good correlation year over year, and it is very stable. So as we can see, Justin Herbert is at the top kind of left of the graph. What this means is he is exceptional at making defenses pay when they mess up, because he ranks second in EPA per play when the defense has a broken coverage or someone has a negative grade. But he is slightly below average when it comes to his EPA per play versus perfect coverage. Now, there is some nuance to this discourse and discussion. If you haven't noticed already, the x-axis is completely negative. There is no quarterback in the NFL that has an EPA per play that is positive versus perfect coverage. So Justin Herbert being negative, it's not a bad thing. Him being below average isn't a great thing, but every single quarterback in the NFL loses their team points when the defense plays a perfect coverage or when everyone does their job on defense. Now, we look at some of the top quarterbacks in the league who do very well versus perfectly covered plays. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. I know Tua and Trevor Lawrence are here also, but they also have a very small sample size to work off of. So, good quarterbacks generally do well versus perfectly covered plays, but great quarterbacks have a higher correlation with non-perfectly covered plays than they do perfectly covered plays. So what does that mean? If we looked at a quarterback's perfectly covered play, EPA per play. So if we look at their position on the x-axis and compare that to their overall EPA per play. Right, so overall EPA per play is not just breaking it up by perfectly covered and non-perfectly covered. It's looking at all plays, QB scrambles included. If we compare that overall EPA per play with perfectly covered EPA per play, and then we see the correlation, and then we compare that specific correlation to a quarterback's overall EPA per play and their non-perfectly covered EPA per play, the non-perfectly covered EPA has a higher correlation with overall QB play. So that's actually a really good thing, because a good thing for the Chargers and for us as fans in general of Justin Herbert, because he does very well in non-perfectly covered plays, right? His EPA is second in the league since 2019 versus non-perfectly covered plays. And since that specific bracket of QB play is correlated better with overall EPA, it's exceptional that Justin Herbert performs very well in that specific statistic. So this is one graph that I thought did a great job of showing how quarterbacks do when the defenses mess up and when the defenses play perfect. And again, I think there's a lot of room for Justin Herbert to move right, but the fact that he does so well when the defense, messes up, I think shows that he has the potential to grow even more as a quarterback, which, as we all know as fans, is a very scary sight. The next thing I looked at was how Justin Herbert, just looking at this exact same graph, but only on pressured plays. And I mean, my mind was blown. Like, just my mind was blown when I made this graph and I saw where Justin Herbert is. No quarterback in the NFL has a higher EPA per play on broken coverages while pressured than Justin Herbert. The average EPA per play when pressured against a broken coverage is like negative 0.16. You can see the red line on the horizontal red line. Justin Herbert averages like a 0.27 EPA per play versus broken coverages when pressured. And you can see here, the dot size represents perfectly covered plays. He's even above average versus perfectly covered plays when pressured. It is amazing what Justin Herbert can do when pressured. And it's, at PFF, I work for them now. I'm not talking shit about them. I don't have anything to talk shit about them either. PFF, one of their main arguments after his rookie year was like, because he was so good under pressure, he's going to regress overall. It doesn't bear out in the data. And he did get worse under pressure. I'll give them that point I agreed with when they brought it up. What I didn't agree with was him getting worse under pressure made him a worse quarterback overall. Like, Justin Herbert having a positive EPA when pressured is mind-blowing. Right? So he's first in EPA per play versus broken coverages when pressured. For reference, and even if we look at when the defense has a perfectly covered play and they pressured the quarterback, Justin Herbert's still above average. He does lose about 0.6 points per play. But look at Tom Brady. Like, even this is a Chargers podcast. Tom Brady loses his offense about 1 point every single time the defense has a perfect coverage and they pressure him on a given play. Mind-blowing. Again, Justin Herbert is years beyond, where he's supposed to be coming out of college. And the last thing I looked at, the exact same graph, except these are plays where the quarterback isn't pressured. Again, Justin Herbert shows up very well. He has the fourth highest EPA per play versus broken coverages when he's not pressured, and he's above average against perfectly covered plays from a clean pocket. So, the last graph was looking at pressured plays. This graph is looking at clean pockets. Justin Herbert's above average in both. Our guy Joe Burrow is first in EPA per play versus broken coverages from a clean pocket. Again, I don't really care what Burrow is. This is a Chargers podcast, but just for the comparisons, I thought it's we could talk a little bit about that if needed. But yeah, Justin Herbert shows up very well, and it ultimately, I want to go back to the first graph because one of my friends, Steven, or I guess I consider him my friend. I don't know what he considers me. Steven Ruiz had a really good point on Twitter when I posted this specific graph, and it's like, okay, Justin Herbert does very well when the defense messes up, but when the defense plays perfect, he's below average. But I think part of that is because Justin Herbert doesn't do like the off-script stuff as much as a guy like Patrick Mahomes does or Aaron Rodgers. I think, and a guy like Josh Allen, I think he's such a good processor post-snap, like a Drew Brees type processor with a cannon arm, that he does exactly what Joe Lombardi asked him to do. He does exactly what Shane Steichen asked him to do. So he doesn't think of the type of erratic quarterback play that a guy like Patrick Mahomes does, just run around and find someone open. He will throw it to the guy he's supposed to throw it to, and he does that at a very high level. But because sometimes the defense covers the play perfectly, I think he has a tendency to force throws in. He has a tendency to try to fit those tight windows, which most cases it works out. Some cases it doesn't, which is why he's below average versus perfectly covered plays. So again, I'm not too worried about his placement here on the graph. He's only 2 years into his career, and he's so good when the defense messes up. He knows how to take advantage. I think with a little more freedom and a little more open thought on plays where it breaks down, I think he could be easily the best quarterback in the league. And his placement on this graph should move into the quadrant where he's above average or elite in both categories. So again, just real quick to recap this graph, the reason why the x-axis is completely negative is because when the defense has a perfectly covered play, the average EPA on that play is like negative 0.32. So there is no quarterback in the league that performs well or adds any value to their team when the defense has a perfectly covered play. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about relating to perfectly covered plays is the Chargers defense. I'm going to Twitter for this one. This was made by my fellow intern, Haley English 17. If you're listening on Spotify, her Twitter handle is Haley HALEY English 17. So make sure to go follow her. You know, we always support diversity in sports. And it's great to see, her getting into a job with PFF and working with me. And it's been a pleasure to work with her. So real quick, what she looked at was the percentage of perfectly covered plays by defense. Like, how often does a defense have a perfectly covered play? She looked at it in the past 3 years, and she arranged the graph by, the rate at which a team has a perfectly covered play. And you can see the Chargers are average. Like the Chargers have had an average defense in terms of perfectly covering plays. The concerning thing is since 2019, the rate of perfectly covered plays has actually gone down. Right, in 2019, they covered plays perfectly, or every player on their defense who was in coverage had a neutral or positive grade at about a 45% rate. In 2020, that dropped to about 36%, and in 2021, it was about 33%, ballparking there. So I think that there is a concern with it trending downwards. I think part of that is scheme, part of that is injuries. Casey Hayward was really injured in 2020. He was super healthy in 2019. Same thing with 2021. We had Isang Bassi and Devontae Harris starting games for us, right? That's meaningful in graphs like this. So I thought this was a really cool graph. Make sure to go check out Haley's work. Make sure to go check out this graph, because I think there are a lot of cool telling things that can come from this. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope, this was a cool new way to evaluate quarterbacks, look at defenses, look at coverages, because this is a project that I've been taking on at PFF for the past couple of weeks. And I'm excited to hopefully turn this into some type of longer article or some type of work that everyone can look at and view, because I do think this is a really interesting topic that really no one has really explored. So again, thank you for watching until the end of the episode. And with that, as always, Bolts out.